The abandoned warrior. The vast expanse of space stretched out before Zax, a young Vexarian warrior, as he desperately tried to control his rapidly descending ship. The sleek, silver vessel, once a symbol of his people's technological prowess, now spiraled towards an unknown planet, trailing smoke and debris. Zax's four arms worked furiously across the control panel, his scaled skin glistening with sweat under the flashing emergency lights. Mayday! Mayday! This is Scout Zax of the Vexarian Armada. My ship has sustained critical damage. Requesting immediate assistance. His voice, usually steady and commanding, now trembled with a mix of fear and disbelief. The comlink crackled, and for a moment, hope surged through Zax's chest. But the voice that came through wasn't the reassuring tones of Vexarian High Command. Instead, it was cold, detached, and terrifyingly familiar. Scout Zax, your distress call has been acknowledged. However, due to strategic considerations, we cannot allocate resources for your retrieval. May your sacrifice serve the greater glory of Vexaria. The words hit Zax like a plasma blast. Sacrifice. Greater glory. His mind reeled as he processed the implications. He wasn't just being abandoned. He was being discarded. As his ship breached the atmosphere of the unknown planet, memories flashed through Zax's mind. His rigorous training at the Vexarian Academy, the pride in his parents' eyes as he graduated top of his class, the solemn oath he took to protect and serve his people. All of it now seemed like a cruel joke. The ground rushed up to meet him, and Zax braced for impact. With a deafening crash, the ship plowed into the planet's surface, carving a deep furrow through rocky terrain before coming to a stop at the base of a towering cliff. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of escaping gases and the occasional pop of cooling metal. Zax hung limply in his harness, his consciousness fading in and out. When he finally managed to focus, he took stock of his situation. The ship was a total loss, its once gleaming hull now a twisted wreck. Emergency systems sputtered weakly, providing minimal life support. Outside, through the cracked view screen, Zax could see a desolate landscape stretching to the horizon. Jagged rocks and dust devils dotted the alien terrain under a sky that seemed to shimmer with an unsettling purple hue. With great effort, Zax unstrapped himself and stumbled out of the wreckage. The planet's gravity was slightly stronger than what he was used to, making each movement a chore. The air, while breathable, had a metallic tang that made him cough. Think, Zax, think, he muttered to himself, forcing his trained mind to work through the shock. Survival was the priority now. He needed shelter, water, and a way to signal for help, although who would respond to that signal, he wasn't sure anymore. Over the next few days, Zax established a meager existence. He fashioned a shelter using parts of his ship's hull, found a small spring of potable water in a nearby cave, and managed to salvage some emergency rations from the wreck. But as the local star rose and set, painting the alien sky in bizarre colors, a gnawing emptiness grew within him. He was alone. Truly, utterly alone. The betrayal of his people ate at him. Why had he been abandoned? What strategic considerations could possibly justify leaving one of their own to die on an uncharted world? The more he dwelled on it, the more he realized that this betrayal was just the tip of something much larger and more sinister. Zax had always been taught that Vexarians were superior, that their conquest of the galaxy was not just inevitable but righteous. Now he began to question everything. If they could so callously discard one of their own, what atrocities might they be capable of against other species? As the days turned into weeks, Zax's initial despair gave way to a simmering anger. He vowed that he would survive, not just for himself, but to uncover the truth behind his abandonment and expose whatever corruption had infected the Vexarian leadership. His daily routine became a testament to his resilience. Each morning, he would scout the area around his crash site, expanding his knowledge of the terrain. He catalogued the few hardy life forms he encountered, strange, silicon-based creatures that seemed to thrive in the harsh environment. In the afternoons, he worked on repairing what he could of his ship's systems, hoping to boost the range of his distress beacon. But it was during the long alien nights that Zax truly grappled with his new reality. Under a sky filled with unfamiliar stars, he questioned his place in the universe. Everything he had been taught about Vexarian superiority now rang hollow. If they were truly the pinnacle of galactic civilization, how could they act with such callous disregard for life? One night, as Zax sat atop a rocky outcrop, absently fiddling with a piece of his ship's communication array, something caught his eye. A flash of light in the sky, too steady to be a meteor, too fast to be a star. His heart raced as he realized what it must be. A ship entering the atmosphere. For a moment, joy surged through him. Rescue. But then cold reality set in. If it was the Vexarians, they weren't coming to save him. They had made that brutally clear. So who could it be? Zax scrambled back to his shelter, his mind racing. Should he hide? Try to make contact? The decision was made for him as the unmistakable roar of engines filled the air. Whatever, or whoever, was coming. They were landing close by. Grabbing a makeshift weapon fashioned from ship debris, Zax cautiously peered out of his shelter. The sight that greeted him was unlike anything he had ever seen. A ship, sleek but clearly designed for function over form, settled onto the rocky ground less than a kilometer from his position. Its hull bore markings he didn't recognize, in a script he couldn't read. As the dust settled, a hatch opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Zax held his breath as a figure emerged. It was bipedal, but unlike any species he had encountered in his training. He realized as the being removed its helmet. They had no scales, no extra limbs, just smooth skin in various shades of brown and pink, and a crop of fur on top of their head. More of these beings emerged from the ship, their movements cautious but purposeful. They carried devices that Zax assumed were scanning equipment, sweeping the area methodically. With a jolt, Zax realized these must be members of the species he had heard whispered about in the halls of the Vexarian High Command. The ones that the elders spoke of with a mixture of dismissal and poorly hidden concern. Humans. As Zax watched the humans begin to set up some sort of base camp, his mind whirled with possibilities. These weren't his people, coming to either rescue or eliminate him. They weren't any of the subject races he was familiar with from his training. They were an unknown, and in that unknown, Zax saw a glimmer of hope. Taking a deep breath, Zax made a decision that would change not just his fate, but potentially that of the entire galaxy. Slowly, cautiously, he emerged from his shelter, his hands raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Hello," he called out, his translator struggling to produce the unfamiliar language. "I am Zax of the Vexa." "No, I am just Zax. And I need your help." The humans turned, their expressions a mix of shock, curiosity, and, was that compassion? Zax felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in weeks. Whatever happened next, he was no longer alone. And for the first time since his ship had crashed on this desolate world, Zax felt something he had thought lost forever. First contact with humans. The tension in the air was palpable as Zax stood before the group of humans, his four arms raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The humans, for their part, seemed frozen in a mix of shock and fascination. Their scanning devices, momentarily forgotten, hung limply at their sides as they stared at the alien before them. After what felt like an eternity, one of the humans stepped forward. She was shorter than the others, with dark skin and tightly curled hair. Her eyes, a deep brown, held a mix of caution and curiosity as she regarded Zax. "Hello," she said, her voice steady despite the unprecedented situation. "I am Dr. Amara Chen, lead xenobiologist of the Earth Exploratory Force. We come in peace." Zax's translator crackled as it processed the unfamiliar language. He nodded slowly, lowering two of his arms while keeping the other pair raised. "I am Zax," he repeated. I mean you no harm. I need help. Dr. Chen turned to her colleagues, speaking rapidly in a language Zax's translator couldn't quite catch. There was a flurry of activity as the humans conferred, their voices rising and falling in what seemed to be a heated debate. Zax remained still, acutely aware of the weapons some of the humans carried, even if they weren't currently aimed at him. Finally, Dr. Chen turned back to Zax. We're not here to hurt you, she said carefully, but we need to understand your situation. How did you come to be here? Zax hesitated. His Vexarian training screamed at him to reveal nothing, to protect the secrets of his people at all costs. But what did he owe to those who had abandoned him? Taking a deep breath, he made a decision that would alter the course of his life, and potentially, the fate of the galaxy. I was betrayed, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. Left to die by my own people. I don't understand why. The admission seemed to soften something in Dr. Chen's expression. She took a step closer, her hand raised in a calming gesture to her more anxious colleagues. That must have been terrible, she said softly. Perhaps we can help each other understand what's happening here. Over the next few hours, a tenuous trust began to form between Zax and the human expedition. They set up a makeshift neutral zone between their camp and Zax's shelter, where both parties could meet and talk without feeling threatened. Zax learned that the humans were part of an exploratory mission, seeking out habitable planets and signs of intelligent life. They had detected the energy signature of his crashed ship and came to investigate, never expecting to find a living alien. In turn, Zax shared carefully selected information about his people and his situation. He spoke of the Vexarian Armada, their advanced technology, and their expansionist philosophy. But he also shared his doubts, his confusion at being abandoned, and his growing suspicion that something was deeply wrong within Vexarian society. As the local star began to set, painting the sky in its now familiar purple hues, Dr. Chen made a proposal. Zax, she said, her tone both excited and cautious, we'd like to offer you sanctuary aboard our ship. We have better resources there to tend to any injuries you might have, and more advanced communication equipment. Perhaps together, we can figure out what's really going on. Zax hesitated. The offer was tempting. A chance at comfort, at answers. But could he trust these humans? They seemed genuine, but he had thought the same of his own people not too long ago. As if sensing his doubts, another human stepped forward. This one was taller, with pale skin and hair the color of the planet's sand. Look, he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. I get it. You've been screwed over and you're not sure who to trust. But right now, we're the only ones here offering help. You can stay in that wreck if you want. But I don't fancy your chances long-term. The blunt honesty startled a laugh out of Zax. It was so different from the formal, often veiled speech of Vexarian society. He found himself nodding. You're right, he said. I accept your offer. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity and discovery. Aboard the human ship, which they called the Curiosity, Zax was introduced to a dizzying array of new experiences. The ship's medical officer, a jovial man named Dr. Patel, gave Zax a thorough examination, marveling at his alien physiology. 4 hearts, Dr. Patel exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder as he studied the scans. And a respiratory system that can filter out toxins. Fascinating. Zax, for his part, was equally amazed by human technology. It was different from Vexarian tech, less sleek, more robust. Where Vexarian devices often relied on psychic interfaces, human tech was full of buttons, switches, and holographic displays. It was chaotic, but there was an undeniable ingenuity to it. As the days passed, Zax found himself opening up more to the humans. He shared stories of his training, of Vexarian culture and history. In return, the humans taught him about Earth, about their diverse cultures, and their complex, often troubled history. We've made a lot of mistakes, Dr. Chen admitted one evening, as they sat in the ship's observation deck, watching the alien sunset. But we're trying to learn from them. That's why we're out here, not to conquer, but to understand. Zax nodded, a lump forming in his throat. It was so different from the Vexarian philosophy of expansion and domination. He found himself wishing his own people could learn from these humans. But even as Zax grew closer to the human crew, a nagging worry gnawed at him. Why had he been abandoned? What were the strategic considerations that had led to his betrayal? And what did it mean for the rest of the galaxy? His concerns came to a head when, about a week into his stay on the Curiosity, the ship's communication officer burst into the common area, her face pale. "We've intercepted a transmission," she said, her voice shaking. It's not good." The crew gathered around as she played the message. It was heavily encrypted, but the ship's AI had managed to break through enough to get the gist. Zax felt his blood run cold as he listened. The message spoke of a Vexarian plan to destabilize several key sectors of the galaxy. It mentioned sleeper agents and covert operations. But what truly chilled Zax was the casual mention of his own name, as a necessary sacrifice to maintain the cover of a high-ranking Vexarian official. As the message ended, a heavy silence fell over the room. Zax looked around at the human crew, expecting to see fear, maybe even hostility. Instead, he saw determination and concern for him. "Well," said the gruff engineer who had first convinced Zax to trust them, breaking the silence, "looks like we've stumbled onto something big here." Dr. Chen nodded, her expression grim but resolute. "Zax," she said, turning to him, "I know this must be difficult for you. But we need to know. Will you help us uncover the truth, whatever it might be?" Zax looked around the room, at these humans who had taken him in, who had shown him kindness when his own people had abandoned him. He thought of the Vexarian teachings, of their claims of superiority, and he thought of the galaxy, of all the innocent lives that might be at stake. His decision, when it came, was easier than he expected. "Yes," he said, his voice firm. "I'll help you. Whatever it takes, we need to stop this." A ripple of approval went through the human crew. Dr. Chen smiled, reaching out to place a hand on one of Zax's arms. A gesture he had learned was one of comfort and solidarity among humans. "Then let's get to work," she said. "We've got a conspiracy to unravel." As the crew dispersed, each heading to their stations with newfound purpose, Zax felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Fear, certainly. They were going up against the might of the Vexarian armada. Anger at the betrayal he had suffered. But also, surprisingly, hope. These humans, with their chaotic technology and their stubborn determination, had given him a new purpose. Together, perhaps they could uncover the truth and prevent whatever nefarious plans his former people had set in motion. As he followed Dr. Chen to the bridge, ready to share everything he knew about Vexarian tactics and technology, Zax realized something. For the first time since his crash landing, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The battle ahead would be difficult, the odds stacked against them. But with these remarkable humans at his side, Zax felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The galaxy was about to change, and he was going to be part of it. Uncovering the conspiracy. The bridge of the Curiosity hummed with activity as Zax and the human crew pored over star charts, intercepted transmissions, and fragmented intelligence reports. Days had turned into weeks as they worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle of the Vexarian conspiracy. Zax stood at the center of it all, his forearms gesticulating as he explained yet another nuance of Vexarian military strategy to the attentive humans. "The Armada never commits its full force to a single engagement," he said, manipulating the holographic display to show a typical Vexarian fleet formation. "They always hold back a reserve, often hiding it in nearby nebula or asteroid fields." Captain Elena Rodriguez, a stern-faced woman with a shock of silver hair, nodded thoughtfully. "Clever," she mused. It allows them to spring surprises on their opponents or retreat if necessary. Exactly, Zax confirmed. But it also means that any intelligence we gather on their fleet movements is likely incomplete. Dr. Chen, who had been quietly analyzing data in the corner, suddenly sat up straight. "Wait a minute," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. "Zax, you said the Vexarians use psychic interfaces for most of their technology, right?" Zax nodded, unsure where she was going with this. "Well, what if that's not just a cultural preference?" Dr. Chen continued, her words tumbling out rapidly. "What if it's a necessity? A way to ensure that only Vexarians can access their most sensitive systems?" The implications hit Zax like a plasma blast. "Of course," he breathed. "It's not just about efficiency. It's about security." Captain Rodriguez leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Explain," she commanded. Zax's mind raced as he connected the dots. "Vexarian technology is built around our natural psychic abilities," he explained. "We've always seen it as a sign of our superiority. But what if it's also a vulnerability?" The gruff engineer, whom Zax had come to know as Chief Torres, snorted. "Some superiority," he muttered. "Sounds more like putting all your eggs in one basket to me." Dr. Chen was already typing furiously at her console. "If we could find a way to interfere with those psychic signals," she mused, "we might be able to disrupt their entire command structure." For the next several days, the Curiosity became a hive of frenetic activity. Zax worked closely with Dr. Chen and her team, explaining the intricacies of Vexarian psychic technology, while the humans brainstormed ways to counteract it. Chief Torres and his engineering crew worked around the clock, jury-rigging devices and repurposing equipment in ways Zax could barely follow. The ingenuity of the humans never ceased to amaze him. Where Vexarian engineers would have balked at the idea of modifying their precisely calibrated systems, the humans seemed to revel in the challenge. As they worked, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Intercepted transmissions, when viewed through the lens of their new understanding, painted a disturbing picture. The Vexarians weren't just planning isolated acts of destabilization. They were orchestrating a galaxy-wide coup, aiming to simultaneously overthrow or undermine dozens of governments. "It's brilliant in a terrible way," Captain Rodriguez said grimly during one of their strategy sessions. "By the time anyone realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to mount an effective resistance." Zax felt a mix of horror and shame wash over him. This was what his people had become. This was the greater glory they spoke of. He thought of his training, of the noble ideals he had once believed in, and felt sick. But as he looked around at the determined faces of his human companions, he felt something else too. Resolve. They might be outnumbered and outgunned, but they weren't giving up. And neither would he. Their breakthrough came, ironically, from one of the Curiosity's recreational programs. Dr. Patel, taking the much-needed break, had been playing with a virtual reality game when inspiration struck. "It's all about sensory overload," he explained excitedly to the assembled crew. "We can't block their psychic signals entirely, but what if we could overwhelm them? Create so much psychic noise that they can't effectively communicate or control their systems." The idea was audacious, borderline insane, but as Zax and the human scientists dug into the theory, it began to seem more and more plausible. They worked feverishly, converting the Curiosity's long-range sensors into makeshift psychic amplifiers. Zax provided the baseline Vexarian psychic frequency, while Dr. Chen and her team worked on algorithms to generate a cacophony of interfering signals. As they worked, the gravity of their situation became ever more apparent. Decoded transmissions revealed that the Vexarian plan was set to unfold within days. They were running out of time. Finally, after a marathon 36-hour work session, they were ready for a test. The mood on the bridge was tense as Chief Torres initiated the makeshift psychic jammer. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but then Zax gasped, clutching his head. The humans turned to him in alarm, but he waved off their concern. "It's working," he managed to say through gritted teeth. "I can feel it. It's like Static in my mind. Uncomfortable, but not painful. If this were amplified, aimed at a Vexarian fleet, Captain Rodriguez's eyes gleamed. They'd be effectively blind and deaf, she finished. Their fancy psychic interfaces would be useless. A cheer went up from the crew, but Zax couldn't bring himself to join in. Yes, they had found a potential weakness in Vexarian defenses, but exploiting it would mean turning against his own people. The weight of his decision pressed down on him. Sensing his distress, Dr. Chen approached him. "Zax," she said softly, "I know this must be difficult for you, but remember, we're not doing this to destroy the Vexarians. We're doing it to stop a war before it starts. To save lives. Vexarian lives included." Zax nodded, grateful for her understanding. "You're right," he said. "It's just everything I've ever known, everything I've been taught to believe in, is being challenged." Dr. Chen finished for him. "But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes questioning our beliefs is how we grow." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by an urgent call from the communications officer. "Captain," she called out, her voice tense, "we're picking up a transmission. A Vexarian battlecruiser is on its way to this sector. ETA 12 hours. The bridge erupted into action." Captain Rodriguez began barking orders, preparing the Curiosity for potential combat. But Zax stood still, his mind racing. This was it. The moment of truth. They had a weapon that might work against the Vexarians, but it was untested in actual combat. And using it would mean directly opposing his former people. As the humans rushed around him, preparing for the coming confrontation, Zax made his decision. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Captain," he said, his tone firm and resolute, "I have an idea. It's risky, but it might give us an edge." Captain Rodriguez turned to him, her eyebrow raised. "I'm listening," she said. Zax took a deep breath. "We know the Vexarians are coming, so let's use that. I'll send out a distress call, using my old emergency frequencies. When they arrive, they'll be expecting to find a stranded, loyal Vexarian soldier. Instead, they'll find us, ready to spring our trap." The captain finished, a slow smile spreading across her face. "It's bold. I like it." As the crew set about implementing the plan, Zax felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear, certainly. Grief for the life and beliefs he was leaving behind. But also, surprisingly, excitement. He was about to participate in a pivotal moment in galactic history, and he was doing it alongside these remarkable humans, whose resourcefulness and determination never ceased to amaze him. Whatever happened next, Zax knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was about to change, and he was proud to be a part of it. As the Curiosity powered up its systems and prepared for the coming battle, Zax stood tall on the bridge. He was no longer just a castaway, a victim of betrayal. He was a vital part of this human crew, ready to fight for what was right. The Vexarians were coming, but this time, Zax and his new allies would be ready for them. The Great Stand. The bridge of the Curiosity thrummed with tension as the crew waited for the Vexarian battlecruiser to arrive. Zax stood at the command console, his four hands hovering over the controls, ready to transmit his distress call. He could feel the eyes of the human crew on him, their mix of trust and apprehension palpable in the air. Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through the silence. "Remember, people, we only get one shot at this. If our plan fails, we'll be facing a technologically superior force with hostile intent. Let's make it count." Zax nodded, taking a deep breath to steady himself. This was it, the moment that would define not just his fate, but potentially that of the entire galaxy. He pressed the transmit button. "Mayday, Mayday," he spoke in clear Vexarian, his voice carrying the practiced tone of a distressed soldier. "This is Scout Zax, requesting immediate extraction. My position is compromised, and I have critical intelligence regarding the local sector." The message went out, echoing across the vast emptiness of space. Now, All they could do was wait. The minutes ticked by, feeling like hours. Then suddenly, the sensor officer called out, "Contact." Vexarian battlecruiser dropping out of FTL on the far side of the planet's moon. The main view screen lit up, showing the massive form of the Vexarian ship. It was a sight that would have once filled Zax with pride, but now only brought a sense of dread and determination. "They're hailing us," the communications officer reported. Captain Rodriguez nodded to Zax. "You're on, big guy. Make it convincing." Zax stepped forward, schooling his features into a mask of relief and desperation. The view screen flickered, revealing the stern face of a Vexarian commander. "Scout Zax," the commander said, his tone a mix of surprise and suspicion. "We received your distress call. Report your situation." Zax launched into the pre-planned story, weaving a tale of a crashed ship, hostile natives, and vital intelligence gathered during his time stranded. He could see the commander's interest peak at the mention of intelligence. "Very well," the commander said after Zax finished. "Prepare for immediate extraction. We'll send a shuttle to your coordinates." As the transmission cut off, the bridge of the Curiosity erupted into action. "They took the bait," Captain Rodriguez announced. "Everyone to battle stations. Dr. Chen, is our little surprise ready?" Dr. Chen nodded from her station, where she had been making final adjustments to their psychic jamming device. "Ready as it'll ever be, Captain. But remember, we won't know for sure if it works until we activate it. Then we'd better make sure we're in position when we do," the captain replied. She turned to the helm. "Take us into low orbit. We need to be close enough for the jammer to work, but not so close that they can target us easily." The Curiosity rose from its hiding place on the planet's surface, climbing through the atmosphere. On the view screen, they could see the Vexarian shuttle descending, its sleek form growing larger as it approached. "Shuttle in range," the weapons officer reported. "Jammer charged and ready." Captain Rodriguez took a deep breath. "This is it, people. Zax, on my mark. Activate the jammer. Weapons, be ready to target the propulsion systems. We want to disable, not destroy. Clear." A chorus of affirmatives rang out across the bridge. Zax felt his heart racing as he positioned his hand over the jammer controls. 3, 2, 1, mark. Zax slammed his hand down on the control. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then suddenly, the approaching shuttle began to wobble in its descent. On the main view screen, they could see the larger battle cruiser shudder, its running lights flickering erratically. "It's working," Dr. Chen exclaimed, her eyes wide as she monitored the readings. "Their systems are going haywire." Captain Rodriguez didn't waste a moment. "Weapons, take out the shuttle's engines. Helm, bring us about to face the battlecruiser. Communications, broadcast on all frequencies. Let them know we're not here to destroy them, just to talk." The next few minutes were chaos. The Curiosity's weapons lanced out, disabling the Vexarian shuttle with surgical precision. The larger battlecruiser, still reeling from the psychic interference, began to fire wildly, its shots going wide. "Evasive maneuvers," Captain Rodriguez ordered. The Curiosity dove and weaved, narrowly avoiding the battlecruiser's attacks. "Return fire. Target their weapon systems only." Zax watched in awe as the human crew worked in perfect synchronization. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, they moved with a fluid efficiency that was almost beautiful to behold. The Curiosity danced around the larger Vexarian ship, its smaller size, and the human's superior piloting allowing it to stay just out of harm's way. Slowly but surely, the tide of the battle turned. The Vexarian ship's attacks became more erratic, its movements sluggish. Zax could only imagine the chaos on its bridge as the crew struggled against the psychic interference. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the Vexarian ship stopped firing. The communications officer called out, "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the battlecruiser." The view screen flickered to life, showing the Vexarian commander. His usual composure was gone, replaced by a mix of confusion and grudging respect. "What? What have you done to us?" he demanded. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, her posture straight and commanding. "We've neutralized your advantage, Commander. Now, I suggest we talk. We know about your plans for galactic destabilization, and we're here to put a stop to it." The commander's eyes widened in shock. He turned to Zax, betrayal written across his features. You're working with these humans. Traitor." Zax felt a surge of emotion, shame, anger, but also a fierce pride in his new allies. "No, Commander," he said, his voice steady. "I'm working to save lives, Vexarian lives included. Your plans would plunge the galaxy into chaos. It has to stop." What followed was a tense negotiation. With their psychic systems jammed and their weapons disabled, the Vexarians had little choice but to listen. Zax and the human crew laid out everything they had uncovered about the conspiracy, presenting evidence of the planned coups and the potential devastation they would cause. As the truth sank in, Zax could see the change in the commander's demeanor. The arrogance faded, replaced by a growing horror at what his leaders had planned. I had no idea," the commander finally said, his voice heavy. "We were told this was about securing our future, about bringing stability to a chaotic galaxy. But this is madness." Captain Rodriguez nodded solemnly. "War often is, Commander, but it's not too late to change course. Work with us. Help us expose this conspiracy and bring those responsible to justice." The commander was silent for a long moment, clearly wrestling with his conscience. Finally, he looked up, his expression resolved. "Very well," he said. "I will help you, for the sake of all our peoples." As the tensions eased and plans were made to broadcast the truth to the wider Vexarian fleet, Zax felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had done it. Against all odds, this small human ship and its diverse crew had managed to avert a galactic catastrophe. Looking around at the tired but triumphant faces of his human companions, Zax felt a surge of affection and respect. These remarkable beings, with their chaotic technology and their indomitable spirit, had accomplished what he once thought impossible. As the Curiosity and the Vexarian battlecruiser began their joint transmission to the rest of the fleet, Zax knew that the galaxy would never be the same. A new era of cooperation and understanding was dawning. And he, Zax, once an abandoned scout on a desolate planet, now stood at the forefront of this monumental change. All thanks to the incredible humans who had taken a chance on a stranded alien and shown him the true meaning of humanity. The battle was over, but their journey was just beginning. And Zax couldn't wait to see what the future held. A new alliance. The days following the confrontation with the Vexarian battlecruiser were a whirlwind of activity. The joint transmission from the Curiosity and the converted Vexarian ship had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. As the truth of the conspiracy spread, reactions varied from disbelief to outrage to relief. Zax stood on the observation deck of the Curiosity, watching as ships from various species converged on their location. The sight was unprecedented. Vexarian cruisers flying alongside human vessels, joined by the sleek ships of the Andorians, the organic-looking craft of the Zhogs, and dozens of other species Zax had only heard about in his training. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Dr. Chen's voice broke through his reverie. She joined him at the window, her eyes reflecting the starlight. Zax nodded, still somewhat overwhelmed. "I never thought I'd see anything like this," he admitted. "Vexarians, humans, and so many others, all working together." Dr. Chen smiled. "That's the thing about crises," she said. "They have a way of bringing people together, showing us that our differences are less important than our shared desire for peace and understanding." Their conversation was interrupted by the ship's intercom. "Dr. Chen, Zax, please report to the conference room. The summit is about to begin." As they made their way through the ship, Zax marveled at how much had changed in such a short time. The Curiosity, once just a small exploratory vessel, had become the epicenter of a galactic diplomatic effort. Its corridors were now filled with representatives from dozens of species, all gathered to forge a new path forward. The conference room was packed when they arrived. Captain Rodriguez stood at the head of the table, flanked by the Vexarian commander who had joined their cause. Around the table sat an array of beings that would have been unimaginable just weeks ago. The tentacled Jokes ambassador, the crystalline form of the Lithosian representative, the avian features of the avian diplomat, and many more. As Zax took his seat, he felt a momentary pang of uncertainty. What place did he have here, among these leaders and diplomats? But then he felt a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Chief Torres, giving him an encouraging nod. Captain Rodriguez called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice carrying the weight of the moment. "We stand at a crossroads. The conspiracy we've uncovered threatened to plunge our galaxy into chaos. But in coming together to stop it, we've discovered something profound: our capacity for cooperation." The Vexarian commander stepped forward. "My people have much to answer for," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "The actions of our leaders were inexcusable. But I stand here today to offer not just apologies, but a commitment to change." What followed was an intense discussion that lasted hours. Plans were made for a thorough investigation into the remaining conspirators. Proposals were put forward for new interspecies cooperation in areas ranging from trade to scientific research. Through it all, Zax was struck by the spirit of collaboration that filled the room. There were tense moments, of course. Old grudges and suspicions didn't disappear overnight. But each time conflict threatened to derail the proceedings, Zax was amazed to see how the human representatives often stepped in with creative compromises or disarming humor. As the summit reached its conclusion, a historic declaration was drafted. It called for the formation of a new Galactic Council, one where all species would have equal representation. The Vexarians, as a show of good faith, offered to share their advanced technology with other races. In return, they would receive help in reforming their government and society. When the declaration was finally signed, a cheer went up that seemed to shake the very stars. Zax found himself swept up in the celebration, embraced by humans and aliens alike. It was a moment of joy, of hope, of possibility. Later, as the dignitaries began to disperse to their ships, Zax found himself back on the observation deck. He was joined by Captain Rodriguez and Dr. Chen. "So, Zax," the captain said, a twinkle in her eye, "what's next for you? I imagine you'll be quite the hero among your people now." Zax was quiet for a moment, considering. I'm not sure," he admitted. "Everything's changed so much. I don't know if I can go back to being just another Vexarian soldier." Dr. Chen smiled. "Well, how about this?" she suggested. "We're planning to establish a new multi-species research and exploration initiative. We could use someone with your knowledge and experience, someone who's seen firsthand the benefits of cooperation between different races." Zax felt a surge of excitement at the idea. "You mean, continue working with humans and others?" Captain Rodriguez nodded. "If that's what you want. You've proven yourself a valuable ally, Zax. More than that, you've become a friend. We'd be honored to have you continue this journey with us." Emotion welled up in Zax's chest. He looked out at the stars, at the ships of so many different species working together to chart a new course for the galaxy. Then he turned back to the humans who had taken him in, who had shown him a new way of seeing the universe. "I would be honored," he said, his voice thick with feeling. "Thank you for everything." As they stood there, looking out at the vast expanse of space, Zax felt a profound sense of hope. The galaxy was entering a new era, one of cooperation and mutual understanding. There would be challenges ahead, certainly. Old habits and prejudices wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time, there was a real chance for lasting peace and progress. And it had all started here, on this small human ship, with a crew who had been willing to take a chance on a stranded alien, who had shown him the true meaning of humanity, not just as a species, but as an ideal: compassion, ingenuity, determination, the will to reach out across the stars and forge connections, even in the face of danger and the unknown. As the Curiosity prepared to embark on its next mission, Zax knew he was exactly where he belonged. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities. New worlds to explore, new alliances to forge, new understandings to be reached. And Zax, once an abandoned warrior, now stood ready to face that future. Not alone, but alongside his human friends, and a galaxy united in a way it had never been before. The adventure was just beginning, and Zax couldn't wait to see where it would lead.